Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all here to our service today. My name's Pam. Welcome. If you're in person or Zooming in from anywhere you're Zooming from, we're so glad that you're spending some time with us today on Sunday morning. And I'm one of the trustees, and relax, enjoy, and we'll see you at coffee hour. Bye for now.
Our opening words today come from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and he lived from 1749 until 1832. This is a piece that he wrote called The Legacy. The language is a little bit old language, but they were right for today. No living atom comes at last to naught. Active in each is still the eternal thought. Hold fast to being, if you would be blessed. Being is without end. Thank you.
Miss Rumphius, Story and Pictures by Barbara Cooney. To St. Nicholas, patron saint of children, sailors, and maidens. The Lupin lady lives in a small house overlooking the sea. In between the rocks around her house grow blue and purple and rose-colored flowers. The Lupin lady is little and old, but she has not always been that way. I know. She is my great aunt, and she told me so. Once upon a time, she was a little girl named Alice, who lived in a city by the sea. From the front stoop, she could see the wharves and the bristling masts of tall ships. Many years ago, her grandfather had come to America on a large sailing ship. Now he worked in the shop at the bottom of the house, making figureheads for the prows of ships and carving Indians out of wood to put in front of cigar stores. For Alice's grandfather was an artist. He painted pictures, too, of sailing ships and places across the sea. When he was very busy, Alice helped him put in the skies. Ooh. In the evening, Alice sat on her grandfather's knee and listened to his stories of faraway places. When he had finished, Alice would say, "When I grow up, I too will go to faraway places. And when I grow old, I too will live beside the sea." "That is all very well, little Alice," said her grandfather, "but there is a third thing you must do." "What is that?" asked Alice. "You must do something to make the world more beautiful," said her grandfather. "All right," said Alice, but she did not know what that could be. In the meanwhile, Alice got up and washed her face and ate porridge for breakfast. She went to school and came home and did her homework. And pretty soon she was grown up. Then my great aunt Alice set out to do the 3 things she had told her grandfather she was going to do. She left home and went to live in another city far from the sea and the salt air. There she worked in a library, dusting books and keeping them from getting mixed up, and helping people find the ones they wanted. Some of the books told her about faraway places. People called her Miss Rumphius now. Sometimes she went to the conservatory in the middle of the park. When she stepped inside on a wintry day, the warm, moist air wrapped itself around her, and the sweet smell of jasmine filled her nose. "This is almost like a tropical isle," said Miss Rumphius, "but not quite." Ooh. Ah. So Miss Rumphius went to a real tropical island where people kept cockatoos and monkeys as pets. She walked on long beaches, picking up beautiful shells. One day she met the Bapa Raja, king of a fishing village. "You must be tired," he said. "Come into my house and rest." So Miss Rumphius went in and met the Bapa Raja's wife. The Bapa Raja himself fetched a green coconut and cut a slice off the top so that Miss Rumphius could drink the coconut water inside. Before she left, the Bapa Raja gave her a beautiful mother of pearl shell on which he had painted a bird of paradise and the words, "You will always remain in my heart." "You will always remain in mine too," said Miss Rumphius. My great aunt, Miss Alice Rumphius, climbed tall mountains where the snow never melted. She went through jungles and across deserts. She saw lions playing and kangaroos jumping, and everywhere she made friends she would never forget. Finally, she came back to the land of the lotus eaters, and there, getting off a camel, she hurt her back. "What a foolish thing to do," said Miss Rumphius. "Well, I have certainly seen faraway places. Maybe it is time to find my place by the sea." And it was, and she did. From the porch of her new house, Miss Rumphius watched the sun come up. She watched it cross the heavens and sparkle on the water, and she saw it set in glory in the evening. She started a little garden among the rocks that surrounded her house, and she planted a few flower seeds in the stony ground. Miss Rumphius was almost perfectly happy. "But there is still one more thing I have to do," she said. "I have to do something to make the world more beautiful." "But what? The world already is pretty nice," she thought, looking out over the ocean. The next spring, Miss Rumphius was not very well. Her back was bothering her again, and she had to stay in bed most of the time. The flowers she had planted the summer before had come up and bloomed in spite of the stony ground. She could see them from her bedroom window, blue and purple and rose-colored. "Lupins," said Miss Rumphius with satisfaction. "I have always loved lupins the best. I wish I could plant more seeds this summer so that I could have still more flowers next year." But she was not able to. After a hard winter, spring came. Miss Rumphius was feeling much better. Now she could take walks again. One afternoon, she started to go up and over the hill where she had not been in a long time. "I don't believe my eyes," she cried when she got to the top, for there, on the other side of the hill, was a large patch of blue and purple and rose-colored lupins. "It was the wind," she said as she knelt in delight. "It was the wind that brought the seeds from my garden here, and the birds must have helped." Then Miss Rumphius had a wonderful idea. She hurried home and got out her seed catalogs. She sent off to the very best seed house for 5 bushels of lupin seed. All that summer, Miss Rumphius, her pockets full of seeds, wandered over fields and headlands, sowing lupins. She scattered seeds along the highways and down the country lanes. She flung handfuls of them around the schoolhouse and back of the church. She tossed them into hollows and along stone walls. Her back didn't hurt her anymore at all. Now some people called her that crazy old lady. The next spring, there were lupins everywhere. Fields and hillsides were covered with blue and purple and rose-colored flowers. They bloomed along the highways and down the lanes. Bright patches lay around the schoolhouse and back of the church. Down in the hollows and along the stone walls grew the beautiful flowers. Miss Rumphius had done the third, the most difficult thing of all. My great-aunt Alice, Miss Rumphius, is very old now. Her hair is very white. Every year there are more and more lupins. Now they call her the Lupin Lady. Sometimes my friends stand with me outside her gate, curious to see the old lady who planted the fields of lupins. When she invites us in, they come slowly. They think she is the oldest woman in the world. Often she tells us stories of faraway places. "When I grow up," I tell her, "I too will go to faraway places and come home to live by the sea." "That is all very well, little Alice," says my aunt, "but there is a third thing you must do." "What is it?" I ask. "You must do something to make the world more beautiful." "All right," I say. But I do not know yet what that will be. Yay to Miss Rumphius.
Now it's time for our affirmation. And I think you all have, if you don't know it, we'll start again. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve the needs of all beings, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with the source of our being. And we will follow that up with our offering for church support and the family center.
Sorry, hold on. Bear with me, please. There we go. There he is.
As crucial as they are to illuminate a future landscape of hope, all of the innovative environmental solutions and strategic social models alone won't be enough to alter our collective course. What's ultimately required is a change of heart, a shift in how we relate to each other and to the whole of the living earth. How then can we enhance and accelerate our learning about conscious kinship? Well, first it might help to stop idolizing rational intelligence to the exclusion of our other capacities. A wealth of additional information could be available to us if we also valued the abundant physical, emotional, and intuitive cues we all receive. Fortunately, we have an abundance of relational intelligence to learn from, if only we can humbly accept its tutelage. The natural world is resplendent with symbiotic, long-term reciprocal relationship between blossom and pollinator, moisture and mycelium, plants and herbivores. In nature, no one lives in isolation, and the sense of balanced interdependence is palpable in any thriving ecosystem. We can opt to be mentored by its mastery if we can quiet ourselves long enough to hear, smell, feel, and learn from it. May we practice being still and really listening to ourselves, to each other, and to the gentle whispers of the ancient intelligence of the living earth. If we can do that, we will build a contagious energy that will ultimately lead to real healing and restoration, the restoration of our wholeness as a global community, of our deep and fundamental interdependence with each other, with other species, and with the whole interwoven web of creation. So as the Lakota people say in ending every prayer, Oma Takiosin, to all our relations, Amen, Ah woman, and Aho. Thank you.
Hi. Um, so today our focus is on hidden figures, those people who are not as well known as some of the people that we've been exploring. And so you'll hear from me right now, and then Anne Marie will talk, and Sharon will talk, and Hallie will talk. So this is my hidden figure, Gaylord Nelson. In 1969, Gaylord Nelson had an idea for a national teach-in on the environment to send a message to Washington that public opinion was solidly behind a bold political agenda on environmental problems. That idea became Earth Day, and he became known as the father of Earth Day. Gaylord Nelson, as I have found out while researching him for this service, is definitely a hidden figure in our theme of creating Earth community. I have to admit, I didn't know him. I didn't know who he was when we began researching these hidden figures, but I became very interested in him because of his commitment to Earth Day. Gaylord Nelson had a distinguished career as a U.S. Senator of Wisconsin from January 1963 to January 1981, and served as governor also of Wisconsin from January 1959 to January 1963 in the Democratic Party. He was a leading figure in the fight against environmental degradation and social injustice in the 20th century. His attention was focused on folks who were disadvantaged, and he never overlooked the social and ecological costs of technological innovation and industrial expansion. Senator Nelson was instrumental in pushing forward numerous programs, including civil rights legislation, the war on poverty, and Operation Mainstream, which appropriated millions of dollars for the creation of conservation jobs and skills training for low-income people and the elderly under the Green Thumb Project. He was also very closely involved with legislation around the Clean Air Act of 1970, the Clean Water Act of 1972, and the Endangered Species Act of 1973. An interesting side fact is that the EPA was formed in 1970, which he was a proponent of also. Unable to interest his colleagues in Congress to take ecological concerns seriously, Senator Nelson spoke out often about the Vietnam War with its huge defense spending, which he saw deflecting funds and focus away from domestic crises. Having read an article about the anti-Vietnam War teach-ins organized by college students and faculty to raise awareness about the war that were occurring on college campuses, he wondered if this model would work on this crisis. Thus, he proposed the first Earth Day as a grassroots movement. He and his staff worked on figuring out how to sponsor environmental teach-ins on college campuses nationwide to be held on the same day in the spring. This day turned out to be April 22nd, 1970. An interesting tidbit is that critics of the movement pointed out that April 22nd happened to be Vladimir Lenin's birthday, but Senator Nelson rebutted that it was also, quote, the birthday of the first environmentalist, Saint Francis of Assisi, end quote. How this theme weaves and interweaves the more we delve. Anyway, through newspaper articles, rallies, and meetings, the idea and news of Earth Day in the current vernacular went viral. And the rest, as they say, is history. I'd like to quote here, an astonishing success. The first Earth Day was celebrated by some 2 million Americans at 2,000 college campuses, at 10,000 primary and secondary schools, and in hundreds of communities. More than 40 years later, its commemoration attracts hundreds of millions of people in countries all over the world, end quote. There is so much more about this man, this hidden figure, and his contributions to our nation, our planet. We'll have resources on our website and or printed out on the harvest table for you to explore if you want to. I myself participated in that first Earth Day, I remember very clearly. I joining with friends to clean up a small stretch of road near my home. I imagine many of you were involved and maybe continue to be. For now, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Senator Gaylord Nelson. Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, and a mutual respect for all other human beings and all living creatures. We must recognize that we're all part of life around the world. There is a lot more to be done. And now we're going to hear from Sharon.
Thank you so much, Tina. That was very educational. I imagine quite a few of us were around for that first Earth Day.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to look into these hidden figures. The video that we played before Tina started talking was Nina Simons of the Bioneers, and gave us a little sense of what their work is about, opening the heart to the whole world, working together to solve these problems. I admit I had heard the term Bioneers, but I really didn't know much more about it. And I'm so delighted to have had the opportunity to delve into this. Kenny Asubel and Nina, his wife, were the founders of Bioneers. And so here's a little bit about his life. He is, according to Wikipedia, a social entrepreneur, investigative journalist, and award-winning filmmaker. He emphasizes the interdependence of all things and the need to use nature's own diversity, kinship, community, cooperation, and reciprocity in finding the urgently needed solutions to environmental and human crises. His pursuit of botanical medicine, well, I want to go back before I go to that and say, he doesn't say what year he was born, but this might help orient where he is in age. He attended Yale and graduated from Columbia Phi Beta Kappa in 1972. After exposure to dioxin caused stroke-like symptoms when he was 19, well, the regular doctors couldn't diagnose what had caused it, but he went to look for more natural alternative forms of medicine, and they were able to tell what it was from. And he did detox and he got better, and it made him think, I've got to do something. I've been given a second chance. So he moved out of New York City and moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he fell in with folks who taught him about organic gardening and other kinds of simple living practices. So his looking into more about botanical medicine led him to meet Gabriel Howarth. I don't know how you say that word, but that name, but it's Howarth, who had been studying with native farmers and learning how to grow using indigenous practices and saving seed. And so they got together and decided to start a company to share these old indigenous seeds that were open pollinated, not hybrid. And they started a company called Seeds of Change, which I remember from when I started working at the Springfield Co-op. And that was in 1989, and they wanted to help restore biodiversity. During the 70s and 80s, he was looking for people who were working to solve these environmental and social problems. And he was calling them bioneers, like pioneers, but bio, like living. And so in 1990, he and his wife, Nina, started the first Bioneers Conference in Santa Fe. And they had some of the brightest minds who were thinking the same way. They have had a conference every year since. And just a few years later, I think it was in 93, there were so many people, they outgrew the facilities in Santa Fe and moved to Oakland, California. And it's just grown from there. If you go to the website, Bioneers, and look up their conferences and see the list of topics and tracks that they're doing, it's really amazing and very encouraging. So I want to quote here, Bioneers arose from a quest for healing. Now we know more profoundly than ever that restoration is an enterprise of healing of both earth and ourselves. Nature has a profound capacity for healing, and we can act as healers. And now we want to hear about what Anne's wife, Nina, has to say. Anne Marie will tell us more.
Hi, everybody. Coming to you from Portland, Maine. It is such a joy to do this work of the Worship and Arts Committee and the team that we have in this present way that we've come together. So in the last little while, we've all been sort of like looking around and kind of getting very excited about different people. And the hardest part of this task, of course, is there's so many amazing people that any one of us could, and probably even some neighbors, and maybe even some relatives, that they're doing amazing things. It's so inspiring. I'm not going to talk about Nina Simons first because I was assigned 2 people. So I said yes. I'm first going to talk to you about an amazing woman that our own Deb Diebold actually introduced me to. Her name is Pat McCabe, and she's also known as Woman Stands Shining. She is a member of the Navajo Nation. She's an activist, she's an artist, she's a writer, she's a ceremonial leader and an international speaker. She's also a mother and a grandmother. So the reason that I was so enthralled when I was first learning a little bit about Pat McCabe is because she has a way of inviting us to pray and inviting us to ceremony, which completely honors all beings, all life, all elements, and our connection therein. So one of the things she teaches is how to listen. She calls this indigenous listening. And she draws upon the sciences, the indigenous sciences, and she calls it adding and walking the way of thriving life. She wants us to sort of really think deeply and be in communion with all living things. So let me just give you an example. She practices the Lakota way of prayer. And so, for instance, when she talks about, she always has water during her ceremony. When she went to school, she learned about the closed loop of water, like most of us probably did. She went to a Christian school, and they were taught that, water evaporates into the air, and then it forms clouds, and they go around, and they then rain or other kinds of precipitation on top of the mountains. And so we have rivers and lakes and streams. But what she says now is that water is life, and water is living, and water has a consciousness. And this water right here has been around forever. This water has been through the bodies of all of the beings that have ever lived. So here we are. And we say thank you to water. We appreciate water. We honor water, because without water, there would be no life. That's just a little bit. And her own words are amazing if you have a chance to ever hear her. Or she has a number of beautiful ceremonies and prayers on YouTube. So Pat McCabe, Woman Stands Shining on YouTube. So I wondered, how did she get this name, like Woman Stands Shining? And as I was watching and reading and listening to her, one of the things that she offers is an invitation to go out into the world. And it could be your backyard, it could be your living room, could be your front porch. And to really listen, to go into a place that feels comfortable for you. And this can be your imagination. She calls this first ceremony. And she invites us to make an offering, because when we are going out into the world, we need to bring something. We're all part of this. She uses the medicine wheel as an example. In the medicine wheel, every living being and every element is represented. And so we have a place on this. Human beings have a place. And we also have a responsibility. So as we go out and find our quiet place, our sacred space, and we make our offering, and for some people that's tobacco, for some people that's cornmeal. But she says, you can even take a piece of your hair and offer this. Because what we want to come away with when we do this deep listening is we want to listen. So we call on our ancestors, we call on all beings of light and love and harmony to help us answer the question about how can I be a human being that brings something into this time that nourishes the world? Very much like our Miss Rumphius, how can I help this world be a better place? So I just want to leave you with that. We all have a way of offering, and we all have a way of standing in our place and bringing forth something where we can leave the world. And that is Pat McCabe from Woman Stands Shining. Now, as Sharon said, I will also talk to you just a little bit. I have to go into my my device here where I put all my notes, because I'm also going to talk to you about Nina Simons. Okay, where did I put her? Sorry, just a moment. Such patience. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Nina Simons, as some of you have already seen, she was the narrator on the little video that we had, and she's a co-founder with her husband that Sharon talked about for Bioneers. She was born in Manhattan in 1957, close to my age. And she's been with since 1990. Bioneers has acted as a fertile hub of social and scientific innovators with practical and visionary solutions for the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges. Nina is renowned for her open-hearted explorations of the difficult psycho-spiritual, emotional, and relational challenges facing us. She seeks to birth a far more compassionate, just, and nature-honoring world. She tells us that what is ultimately needed is a change of heart so that we may enjoy our conscious kinship with all beings. And you saw some of that in the short video that we showed. And we must quiet ourselves long enough to really listen and build a contagious energy between ourselves and all other entities. She encourages herself and us to cultivate a life that is heightened by awareness and to reclaim all the parts of ourselves. And through her presentations and tributes, and with extraordinary tenderness, honesty, and vulnerability and courage, Nina offers us help to see that embracing loss and our woundedness can strengthen us in our resolve to preserve and thrive in the struggles that we are engaged in. We can remake ourselves at any age by choosing consciously and repeatedly how we live. By practicing and holding ourselves accountable, we can create new neural pathways that help us become who we most yearn to be. She's a woman of science, and she is a woman of heart, and she is a woman well worth listening to. I want to leave you with a beautiful prayer that Nina shared on one of her videos. May we listen with open hearts and ready hands. May we shed our certitude at the door and practice not knowing. May the soil of our souls be sown with seeds that expand our capacity for compassion, watered by the grief that strengthens our commitment, and fired by the outrage that fortifies our will. May our roots entwine underground like aspen trees or Seven Sisters oaks, whose underground networks of connection offer the resilience to weather hurricanes and storms. May we leave each other with stories carried like seeds in our feathers to sow them wherever and with whomever we next land. And may we savor together some visceral taste of beloved community, so nourishing, so enlivening, so desirable, that our hearts and hands take it on, and that the flaming light of our purposes will not be quenched. Thank you, Nima Simons. Thank you, Pat McCabe. Hallie will bring us into your own community. Thank you, Hallie.
How am I going to follow all that? I'm going to bring us home to ourselves and our town here with catching up a little bit, updating you on our hospital meadow restoration project, and a very simple way in which all of you could help in this and other similar projects that hopefully we will get starting more and more around town. So you may know a few years ago, it was probably originally kind of my idea, but I got a few others on board, and the hospital, the administration at the hospital at the time, Josh Dufresne, was, yes, let's stop mowing these steep hillsides. And I know just the one I want to start on. It's a great idea. And so it took a while to get communications to the mowers and so on, but eventually the mowing stopped. And I had a wonderful partner with Cheryl Joy Lipton, who's an ecological landscaper professional from Chester, and great, very passionate about her work. And we started we put planted native plants and seeds, and the hillside underneath the meeting house, there's a lot of beautiful wildflowers there already. The first hillside on the left as you go up still needs quite a bit of work, but we started planting things and so on, and had some signage. After a couple of years, or by last year, the signage had disappeared, and we were getting a plan together for new signage, a nice wooden sign with artists' work on it, and maybe some selective mowing, just so people knew that this area is being tended. Because one of the first reactions they got was, from people, what, you don't even have enough money to take care of this? Keep it looking neat. And that's, of course, they hear from the complainers. They don't hear from the people who understand and like what's going on. Last year, there was a new administrator, and I reached out end of May, early June, to have a meeting with him about our plans to go forward. And I was put off, he's too busy with the budget, and come back in a few weeks. So when I got back from my wonderful trip to Italy in mid-July, I went up to make an appointment to see him, and everything had been mowed. And I was devastated. I tried reaching out several times, didn't get anywhere, finally went through a board member, and the word came back, well, they're in the process of hiring a new engineer and head maintenance person. And when that person gets hired, that will be the time to have a meeting. And nothing has happened. So I did have a talk with Josh Dufresne, who was the the lead administrator who got the project going. And he's now, running the River Street Health Center. And he encouraged me to speak before the board and tell them what we have invested in it and so on. I have also dropped these ideas of transforming steep hillsides into pollinator areas with our new school superintendent. She's very open to the idea, engaging the students to create plans and change so we can stop mowing those areas. We'll see where that goes. So there's also, of course, the town to work with. And so my request and plea to all of you, a very simple way to become a hidden, what are we calling them here? Hidden figures towards creating Earth community. If you could call, email, or even in person, talk to any of these people, administrators, board members, who have some kind of say in what goes on in these places, it would be a huge help. Because as I say, they tend to hear when we don't mow, and even when there's signage, they hear from people who this is too much of a transition. And I'm hoping, I'd like to present a plan to our board as well, to transform some of the area out here, which is visible, into a pollinator and not mowed area, combined with some mowing. But I want to throw that seed out for us to think about, to set an example of not mowing so much and where it can look nice, but helping everybody with signage. The signage is critical, so people know that this is intentional and why we're doing it, to help us bridge through this transition from thinking that this constant mowing is something that's beautiful. It's an ecological desert. So when we first started on the Hospital Hill project, we made up a pamphlet that has bullet points about all the reasons to stop mowing and the advantages. And I left some of them outside on the table if anybody wants to pick them up, because it applies to anywhere, not just the Hospital Hill. Okay, I think we've more than covered enough for today. And closing words go back to Anne Marie.
Yes, our closing words for today also come from The Legacy by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The wise being hearkened to their own soul's voice. Thus also shall you find the greatest bliss. To lead where the elect shall follow this, and this alone is worth a hero's choice. Blessed be.
What song are you playing?
This is called This Little Light of Mine. If you all know it, sing along. A little bit here. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. shine all over Springfield. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine all over Springfield. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine all over Springfield. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Thank you. And now we'll have the closing bell and the chalice.
There you go, got it. Nope. Those are the tricky.
Yeah.
That don't go out.